Welcome back to the CashPT Lunch Hour podcast. Today, I got another special episode. I mean, they're all special episodes. There's another special one. I've got Nicole Cozean on the podcast today. She is a pelvic health therapist, cash-based therapist from Orange County. And when she did her business is the Pelvic Sanity, and she's written a book, and she's crushing it in business. And I want to make sure she's on the show so that you guys can get fired up too. So Nicole, welcome so much for joining the podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Aaron. I'm super excited to be here and to talk with you today.
Awesome. So let's start off with a little bit about who you are. So how long have you been a PT? How long have you, did you know you wanted to own a business initially? And
Yeah, so good question. So I graduated from physical therapy school in 2006. So I've been a PT for about 13 years. I graduated from Chapman University, which is in Orange, California. And the answer to, first of all, I didn't even want to be a pelvic PT, much less own a business. So the fact that I'm here today running a cash-based practice is actually kind of funny. So I started out wanting to do just orthopedics and just sports. I come from a basketball background. I currently still referee NCAA women's basketball. I am a sports gal all through and through. But I was exposed to pelvic physical therapy in PT school very briefly. And it's if you look back now at PT school for me, there's so many little things that fell into place that sort of was really leading me to the pelvic health field. I had a couple of clinical instructors that did pelvic PT very differently. One person only did external treatment. One person only did internal treatment. But the fact even back then that I even had clinical instructors that were doing pelvic health was weird because it wasn't that big of a field back then. So then I graduated. I got my first job at a hospital outpatient clinic, which I was I just want to do outpatient. And then they kept saying oh, well, I see you have all this pelvic health experience. And I was like, well, not really. And they were like, do you want to start the pelvic health program here? And I was like, absolutely not. I don't want to specialize that soon because I was scared to specialize to get into such a niche practice so soon out of PT school. But one thing led to another. Long story short is I ended up going to Africa, based on the Hoag Hospital's dime, and got into pelvic health right after that, and met Jesse, who's the whitest dude I know. I met him in Africa, who's my husband, who now runs the business with me. And and then I was sort of all in with pelvic PT pretty much about 6 months after that. So
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, cool. So I love the short story, and I want to dig into a couple pieces real quick for people.
Yeah.
So were you just playing basketball in high school and a little bit in college, and you're yeah, maybe I want to work with athletes? I mean, why PT?
Oh, right. So, I tore my ACL twice. So I did it when I was 13 years old. And I actually was treated by a person who had broken off from their clinic and started their own, and at that time, insurance-based practice, right? Because that was in the mid-90s when insurance-based practices were just rocking and rolling. And so I always worked for them. I worked for them all through high school and when I was back in the summers in college. And I kept in contact with them a lot. And so that's sort of what initially started to me into physical therapy in general. And then so that's, and then I tore my ACL in PT school also, the other side. So playing basketball that time. And then that's how I actually got into officiating, was that I realized in PT school, I almost couldn't finish a clinical rotation because I had torn my ACL at lunchtime with the people that I was working with then. And so I was like, oh shoot, if I can't work, we have manual based jobs, and even working in a hospital where you have to balance people and whatever else you're doing, that was a big wake up call. Oh man, I can't play as much as I wanted to. And so that's when I took up officiating. So that's sort of that whole.
Awesome.
So but that's how I got into PT was because I was a patient myself, but twice with pretty devastating injuries, especially at that time in my life. So that's sort of how I got into that.
Cool. So when you got out of PT school and you graduated,
Mhm.
so you were refereeing basketball at that time too? Were you just,
I started like right after PT school.
was
I
this
wish I
just
would have
like
started earlier.
a side
Yeah.
thing just because
Just
you
a
wanted to
side
learn
hustle, right?
a side hustle? Yeah.
Totally.
So you went and got a job, and
Mhm.
was it what you expected?
You know what? Honestly, I feel like it was exactly what I expected in terms of getting the amount. It was a hospital-based program, right? So I was an outpatient, but that means I got to treat neuro and ortho and wound care, and we had to do hospital on the weekends, which sucked at the time. But
Uh-huh.
I can look back at that now, and for that short time that I did it, I learned a ton. The really cool thing about the hospital that I worked at that time was that they did do 45-minute treatment sessions. So I have had the luxury of always working in a place that at least had 45-minute treatment sessions or more.
Mm-hmm.
So I was never burned out from a volume perspective. What I didn't expect was the amount of red tape and bureaucracy and all of that corporate BS that I just my brain doesn't comprehend. I'm not necessarily like an anti person, but
Mm-hmm.
man, if something doesn't make sense or it's super inefficient, I get super irritated. And so when I was starting to run the pelvic health program there, it took me seriously, no joke, like 9 months to change a form for pelvic PTs to be documenting in a different way. And that just like blows my mind. I couldn't do a community education program because you had
Right.
to ask all these different departments. And so that was where I really started to feel like, gosh, the way I feel like pelvic PT should be community based and administered was really not. I knew I couldn't do it there.
Mm-hmm.
And being a hospital employee was awesome for a lot of reasons. There are pros and cons to that type of situation. And I worked there for 5 years. But then I just, at the end of the day, I started to become really unhappy and frustrated, more than I was excited to treat patients.
Yeah.
Mostly because of all of the other patient care things other than patient care.
Yeah. So it wasn't like you were limited in how you're treating patients. It was like you're being asked and trying to run and improve programs, and you're just hitting roadblocks the whole way through.
Roadblocks the whole way. And like, just a bunch of dumb stuff like that. I have to ask this person, and then it's like it was very hierarchical, right? So I couldn't do what I wanted to do unless I got the medical director of this program to do it. And I was like, that guy doesn't know shit about pelvic physical therapy. Like, why do I have to present with him? I want to present by myself.
Right.
I need to teach him a thing or two. So, so that's the kind of stuff where I just started to feel really, I was coming home and I was dating Jesse at the time. And he kept seeing me just being so frustrated at that whole system. And he was like, you're going to either have to shut off your care button or you're going to have to move on. And at that time, I was lucky enough to get hooked up with another pelvic PT who had been in the field for even longer than I had been, and that she was starting her own out of network practice. And she was leaving a hospital too. So we sort of joined. I followed her about 6 months after. So I was her first employee at her out of network practice. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
yeah.
awesome. So it sounds like you're someone that doesn't do really good with the chain of command.
No, you try. And I think ultimately, you asked at the very beginning, like, did you want to start your own business? And no, absolutely not. But I think that one of the things that's most important for us as entrepreneurs and stuff is to really know ourselves. And no matter how much I was scared I don't want to do the business stuff. That doesn't do it for me. I don't get excited about metrics and stuff. I want to treat patients, but I also knew myself well enough to know that I don't do well with chain of command, even in the best of scenarios. It just doesn't do it for me. It's like I have a lot of opinions about how I think things should be, and I'm a doer. So it's like if there's any like friction with how things should get implemented or an inefficiency in the system, then I start getting really irritated, and it's driven me to be able to do my own stuff we've grown as a business pretty fast, but yeah, you just have to know yourself. And I knew that more than I knew that I didn't want to do business, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How did you know that? Like how'd you figure that out about yourself?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I feel like I've always been a little bit like that. My parents have raised a pretty strong females in our family. So I just feel like I've always been pretty like confident in my abilities and everything like that, except for when it came to actually taking the leap to starting your own practice. Like it's a scary time, you know? And I think that's when Jesse actually helped me a ton, because he comes from an entrepreneurial family. So his mom is like a biomedical engineer, MD, PhD, blah, blah, but she's always been an entrepreneur. So he kind of knew no different. So he was like, why don't you just start your own gig? And I was like, no, let me try to be the clinical director. I'm going to be the best clinical director there is. And then, I just kept getting, shot down with a bunch of things. And so, so he really helped me push to see like, yes, you can do this. I can help you, which was helpful to have that support.
That's awesome. Did you ever get in trouble? Did you ever get in trouble for, pushing your ideas or not following the right order?
In trouble, not really in trouble, but like
I did.
Well, yeah, but like people would always like, it was always like at the meetings and stuff, they would be like whispering in my ear, Nicole, make sure, can you say something about this? And I would always be the one raising my hand being like, okay, so here's where the problem is with A, B, and C. But you know what, I do feel like I wasn't ever just a blanket complainer. Like there was always thought behind. So I was always constantly thinking about how can this process be better? What can we actually do to make it work more efficiently? What would that mean for this business? I mean, I was a really good little employee because I was pretending like I was the business owner. I think that's why I was getting so frustrated, right? It's like, I feel like we should do it like this. And because of all these things that I stayed up like 10 hours last night thinking about for you, and then so finally Jesse was just like, well, if you're going to be like working so hard for someone else, why don't you work so hard for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm trying to uncover is like, what's the thought process of like successful people? And I know like I've been in the same situations before where I was the only one who spoke up about someone stealing our tips at this spa I worked at, but were you willing to speak up because you didn't feel like you had anything to lose, or was it just something else driving you that you're like, all right, I'm going to speak up for everybody else and make this problem known and get it in front of the right people?
Yeah, I guess I've never had a problem being that person. I think that comes honestly a lot from like just confidence in yourself. I'm like, I don't give two shits if you think that I am being lame or a bitch or whatever. It's just like, I just feel like we need to fix a problem, like there's a problem here, everyone's mad and we need to fix it. And here's my solution based on the system that we're working in. Like, let's do it. Let's go, but then when that doesn't happen, that's when I start to get really frustrated. I don't mind problems.
You're a problem solver.
Yeah, we run into them every day,
right?
Every hour, so it's like now it's almost like weird if there's not a problem we have to solve right now. Right? It's like if everything's just running really smoothly, I was like, is that like what's happening? Something needs to happen.
Yeah. I always tell people, I was like, look, my job's not to solve all your problems, it's to give you better problems. It's like,
right,
and then
totally
we can solve the better problems, right?
Exactly.
So what was the pivotal point at which you became a pelvic PT? Like, what is it? Because a lot of people like, just like you said, like, I don't even want to, I don't even know why I'm here at PT. I don't even want to go there. I don't even want to like, it's hard conversations for some people. And it's just like what you said. It's like, so what's the pivotal point at which you went from being like, hey, I'm going to go, work with, basketball players the rest of my life
to
like everyone. To like,
I'm help you not pee.
Yeah, I'm gonna go help people with pee, sex, and all the other
sex stuff. Yeah. So that was actually interesting. So I at Hoag Hospital, which is a hospital in Orange County. So I was there. They basically sent me to a bunch of continuing education courses in pelvic PT right away, and then I did a really extensive mentorship program right away. So I was sort of in it pretty fast. And I was doing half ortho and half pelvic at the same time. And there was honestly one pivotal day where I was treating a 17-year-old kid that had broken his ankle, and he came in like 3 weeks post-surgery, like skateboarding, not doing anything that I was saying. And he was just like the perfect example of just like, he's gonna do fine kind of no matter what I do. I mean, we could guide him on a few things. And then right after him, there was a person who had not been able to have sex for 5 years. They were married. They wanted to have kids. And I had been working with her she was one of my first patients. I'd been working with her for about 3-4 months at the time. And they came back in, her and her husband came back in and were like, we had sex for the first time with only like 3 out of 10 pain. You've given us hope that we can have a baby. And I was just like, oh my God, like this is, to me, that was like, I was almost crying that day. And I was like, for me, that was a pivotal moment. And like, gosh, I need to be with this population. And that sort of, I didn't look back from there. I went back, I even ramped up the pelvic program even more after that, and just never looked back. And I don't miss ortho because I do ortho every day still. And I feel like that's really the blend of what pelvic PT needs to be like. Is we cannot be so laser focused at the pelvic floor. We have to look above and below the pelvis. And so I end up being an ortho PT that happens to also do internal exams of the pelvic floor. So that's where it's really blended both of my passions still. And I'm still helping athletes get back to what they're doing. It's just not about knee pain. Now it's about not having incontinence when they're getting a rebound. So,
That's
so
awesome.
it's a perfect blend.
Yeah. So do you feel like some pelvic, like this, I'm going to project a little bit. Do you feel like some pelvic PTs are like, well, there's such a need for pelvic floor PT that I'm only going to focus on the pelvis and their problem. And then it's like just only focusing on the knee pain rather than the hip and ankle and all that stuff. You feel like that's what's happening?
Yeah, I feel like that's a big part of it. I feel like part of it is that because we don't get a lot of education about it in school, then you go and you're sort of compartmentalizing things, right? You go and you're a PT and you get out of school, and then you're like, now I'm going to go into pelvic, and all of the pelvic floor courses, most of them anyways, are all pelvic floor centric because that's what you didn't learn. But at the end of the day, that really does need to be combined back with every other knowledge piece that you ever learned with ortho and sometimes neuro and pain science and all this stuff, right? So I think that there's just a bit of a flawed clinical mentorship with people that are starting to go into pelvic PT that are just too, biofeedback. I need to just stick a sensor up there, that kind of a thing. And that's really just like so far from where our practice is going. And so I feel like that's why one of the big things that I wanted to start my own clinic was that I want to be able to train my own PTs to like do pelvic PT how I feel like it should be administered, you know? And that was really a driving passion to end up leaving the second place that I worked into starting my own.
That's awesome. So you're 3 years in business and you've got 5 physical therapists, and how many other people working?
Yeah. So 5, including me. So we just hired our 4th physical therapist. And then I have a massage therapist that's about 3 days a week. And we're just currently, literally this week, training our 2nd front desk person to make sure we have coverage for actually all the hours of the clinic from 8 to 7. Cause that used to be, still is actually, Jesse and my like responsibility to just still be here the whole time. So we have a front desk person already, massage therapist, and 4 PTs. We run mindfulness classes. We have a little gym area where we do small group training. It's really exciting, but I cannot believe it's only been 3 years. This has like exceeded all of my expectations. We've already had to expand our space. When I first started, we just had 1,500 square feet, and it was just me. And I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I have a 3-room clinic. with this huge open space. Like, what is going on? And is that a huge mistake? Oh my gosh, should I have treated somewhere else first? And now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, we've already had to expand. It's been really exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations. I mean,
Yeah.
that's huge. You know, I think the thing a lot of people think is that, oh, well, cash-based PT is only like one person. It can't go beyond that one person. And, you know, I mean, you're not the first, you're not the last to add other people. And I just want to make sure, like, I point that out, like, one, that's awesome that you're doing it. And two, it's probably just something that sound like you were just expected, or is like natural extension of what you were doing. And
Yeah. And so, I mean, and it's like, you can only treat so many patients, right? So it's like, I feel like my reach is expanded with the people that I'm training here. And, but I will say this is that because we met like a few years ago. I think I was just like, 6 months or maybe even a year
like
into
2 years
practice.
ago, I was speaking at the California Physical Therapists Association, and you came out for a drink with us. And
yeah. But at your stuff at the very beginning it was so helpful to just be able to see that someone else has done it. I can do this too. It's going to be okay. Like there's a lot of steps that, you had outlined, especially on your CashPT Nation Facebook group and stuff. There's so much information on there. We used that literally like every day.
That's awesome.
To help us like make decisions and decide like, what are we going to do and what should we do about that and that kind of stuff. So if anybody is like looking to start, like that's where they need to go first, I think, just to sort of wrap their head around, number one, the amount of work that it is going to take, because we're not joking that it's like it's a lot of work, but it's the best work you'll ever do, but there's a lot of other people doing it, and that's like really fun to see that.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I think that just having other people out there knowing, oh, they're doing this, I want to do that. I'm not like the crazy person in the room for thinking like it can be done.
Yeah. And for other people too, it's like, I feel like so proud that I'm creating a job too for other people that maybe don't want to start their own place, because that's totally fine if you don't want to. But man, as a PT, you certainly can choose where you work.
Right.
And so, we see people for an hour, like we don't see more than 9 people in a day. Like that's it. Like I feel really proud that I'm able to create jobs, that places where I would want to work too,
When did you decide? Because I think when we had met, I remember we were talking about like, I think you were talking about like what rate you were going to charge or something. Yes. And I was like, go up, like what, like, how'd you figure that part out? Like, that's not the easiest thing for most people.
It's so hard. You mean how did I decide to raise rates, or how did I decide what my rates are?
Raising rates, choosing rates, like what?
So it was sort of easy for me because the clinic that I was working at in North Orange County, I was moving to South Orange County. So a decent distance away, but we're still, I was basically opening a competing practice. So I was really adamant at that time that it sort of needed to be exactly the same as where I came from. So that's how I sort of started out. But then I think when I met you, I was at the point where I had like a 3 to 4 month waiting list. And I can tell you that I had the most anxiety I feel like I've ever had in raising my prices. Like, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing. And then it is easy at the same time. It's like, I believe in what I'm doing,
right,
but the actual implementation and telling people and seeing their reactions and comments and all this stuff, that's what is hard. But I did it, and we're going to have to do it again pretty soon. And that's okay. So every single time that we have to do it, it gets easier and easier. So again, we just decided to start out at $150 because that's what the other person that I left was charging. Then we raised rates and it was right when I was hiring a second person. So I had a little bit of like, gosh, I'm just hiring a second person. I don't want to have double whammy at the same time, right? Raise rates and have this excess person that has all this time on their schedule. So we did only raise to $165. Man, I wish I would have listened to you more and gone higher, because once you do it, it's hard to do it right back to back, especially in a field like us where, because I know that sometimes when you guys raise rates and you're selling packages and stuff, you get discharged patients pretty quickly, but we see people for a really long period of time. So it's a lot harder, in my opinion, to raise rates on somebody that's already currently coming in, and they're going to be coming in for quite a long more
Right.
time. It's just a little bit different, but we're going to have to do it again, and that's okay. And my goal is probably to go up to like 225 and cross that like 200 mark. And just make a big jump this time, because I'd rather make a big jump and not have to do it as often than to make little teeny jumps and, have that happen anyways,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm glad you're thinking in that ballpark, because there are
Yeah, man, we
people
have
who are like, oh, I don't know. I'm thinking $75. And I'm just like, well,
what? Well, and
like,
for us, it's like, okay, so people are charging that for their ankle. Like, I think I can charge that if you have vaginal pain, like, I think that's like, not to like put a price on stuff, but like, that's a pretty important area. And I feel like if you have a problem in that area, it's well worth it to get that fixed, right?
well, it's just like, I always compare, what's the result I want people to get, or what's the result people tell me they want? And I compare that to the cost. And if someone's like, well, I can't have sex with my partner for 5 years. Yeah. That'd be worth a couple $1,000s.
Totally. Yeah. So it's like, so that's where I feel like shifting that mindset though takes time. And I feel like for me, I've been a little bit slower and to have to balance like growing as a clinic and the fluctuation of the schedule that way, right? Because every time you add somebody, like, then the patients get dispersed, and then you have to increase your marketing, and then you get saturated, and then so it's like an ebb and flow there. And then you have to we try to time it correctly when we raise prices, so we're not raising prices at the same time we just hired somebody, like I did at the beginning. Because it impacts you more the more people that you have now. So, what
was the reason? Like, did you just hire someone because you were full? I mean, and did you think like, oh, I better hire someone, or were you apprehensive about doing that as well?
I think I always knew that I wanted a smaller practice. It's one of the reasons why I knew that my goal was at 5 years to be having maxed out the current space. At that time, it was 3 treatment rooms. So I knew I wanted to have a couple of other therapists. Now it's shifted a little bit to think even a little bit bigger than that. And we can talk about that in a second to where the growth is going. But I feel like I was just feeling, because at that point I was running the business and I was treating about 50 patients a week, and people still couldn't get in. And what I felt like though, is that my schedule started to impact their care. So I would see somebody and then they couldn't get in for the next week, because I already had patients scheduling out. And so then I was like, oh crap, like now I'm the problem. I either need to stop taking new evaluations, or I need to hire somebody else. And so that was just sort of a natural progression when the patient care actually started to get affected by my own schedule. That's when I was like, oh shoot, like I need to fix this fast. And then it takes a long time to find a pelvic physical therapist, and much less one that isn't just, so like pelvic floor focused, so it took us a long time. It probably took us like 6 to 8 months to hire our first person. We said no to a lot of people. We still said no to a lot of people, where we really needed to hire somebody, and then I just can't hire that person. Like that's just not a good fit for the clinic. So, and then we had to hire somebody. So we hired, so it was me, then a year later it was Sharon, then about a year later it was Bonnie. And then Amy came right on the heels of Bonnie. And that was a good lesson in man, I was freaked out. I almost said no, just because we just hired Bonnie. But Amy was so awesome that I was like, I talked to Jesse and I was like, we got to do it. We can't let her go. It's taken so long to find good people. And so we hired her right on the heels of someone else, which was like crazy. That's like the second most anxiety ridden time for me, when I was like, oh crap, now I'm responsible for 3 other people's salaries. Like oh my gosh. And we didn't have the patient volume at that time
Yeah.
to justify really hiring her, but I knew that we needed to do it. And so that was like a really tough business decision. And then we just freaking put our foot on the gas with the marketing, and she was full in like 3 months.
Wow. That's
So,
awesome.
yeah. So that was another like, yeah, yikes. What
Yeah.
are we doing? Are we making a mistake?
That's great. So was there like for each additional person, was there like a marker where you were like, okay, we need to hire someone, or is it because it takes so long to find someone that you're always kind of looking?
We're always kind of looking, especially now that we did it with Amy. Like I'm pretty confident now that we could make whatever work, as long as now it's going to be a space issue. So if it's not one thing, it's another, right? So now we actually have it, because we have a private treatment room model with Pelvic PT. We have to make sure that we have like a private treatment room for everybody. So space is going to be our next issue. But yeah, we're kind of always looking, and because we can't let somebody go that is really trained or really, really excited about pelvic PT and really wants to learn and, from us and stuff. So, but at the beginning, it was definitely like we wanted to be, I mean, I think in an ideal world, we would want someone to have like a couple weeks wait list. So like full plus about a 2-week wait list before we would really want to like hire somebody. And bring them on full time and guarantee that those hours and stuff. Less than that, then we work out the deal with somebody to start maybe part-time, work up 3 days a week and then move up. But yeah, so that's kind of our guideline, but now it's kind of all bets are off with how fast we're growing and stuff.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Has there been any pushback from your therapist for when you raise your rates or what you guys are charging, or they just all come in and like, yeah, whatever?
No pushback really. I feel like I do a pretty good job of training them to value our service as well. And making sure that's actually one of my jobs right now, as I'm starting to decrease my patient hours a little bit, is really creating like that training manual, not just from a policies and procedures manual, but from like a cultural perspective of what do we really want someone that's working here to really believe in. Like if you are in your personal life asking the question, do you take my insurance? Like, I don't want you working here. You know, like I feel like I should be paying you enough so that you can want to take our model and use it for ourselves and find great people and pay out of pocket if we need to, and that kind of stuff. So we want people with that same just mindset in general so they're really believing in our service, and then the selling and being a part of that is all they think they're worth it. Heck yeah. They're telling me to raise the rates, you know?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is there is there a certain like secret to finding the right person for you? Like, is there one thing that if someone else is like, gosh, I got a 6-month waiting list and I already charge enough and I need to hire another pelvic PT, like, is it you find someone who's already trained, you train them, or is there something that specific?
Yeah. So at the beginning, I thought I wanted somebody with a bunch of experience. And I made a mistake in hiring one person that had a ton of experience, but that wasn't willing to change. And I had to have my fire time. So I did let that person go pretty quick. It took a long time to find her. I thought it was the right decision, and then boom, nope, wasn't working. And within like a couple of months, I fired. So that was hard. And from that point on, we kind of are more in the, I want somebody right out of school, actually, maybe 1 or 2 years of experience that really wants to learn, that has like an orthopedic mindset and a background, maybe someone like me who wanted to go into ortho and then has now been drawn to pelvic for some reason. So I feel, and then we do the mentorship at our clinic then. So, and then that's where we blend like the clinical aspect with the CashPT mindset aspect. Yeah.
Awesome. So what is it that makes the, like not to disparage all the other PTs who've been out a decade or more like we have,
No,
but
no, no.
what is it that makes the new grads a little bit easier to hire and bring in?
From specifically with pelvic, and this might go for ortho as well. I just feel like there's so much misinformation in some of the continuing education courses, and not maybe misinformation, but just like just a different mindset in how pelvic PT should be treated. That I think that it's easier when you're not when you don't have all of your habits, I feel like that's one of the reasons why I feel like taking a newer grad that's really still hungry, doesn't know a lot. I mean, we can all remember when I don't feel like any PT knows anything until about 5 years out anyways. You just haven't seen, you just don't have enough reps, right? You just you haven't seen enough types of patterns. Pattern recognition is so huge. Like, I just feel like we can teach that mindset a little bit easier than unlearning some stuff and then reteaching in a different way. So not to say that there's not somebody that we would hire that, has 10 years of experience. But in my experience so far, that just, it's not necessarily where we want to go. I want somebody newer that's like really passionate about number 1 PT, number 2 pelvic PT, and then learning.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. Like, I found the same thing. I had a few people originally who had probably 7 to 8, 10 years out. And it's like, well, they've got their way of doing it. And my way of doing it's here. And I want to have a consistent experience. And it's more along my way.
And and we want to have just even the language of how we talk to people, and that we're really working on standardizing it to a point, because we definitely want individualized, like I want each individual PT to kind of get their own mojo going, but I also want like an overarching theme of like, if you come to Pelvic Sanity to get pelvic health care, then this is how we talk about this is what we do here, and then there's individual variants both from the PT perspective and the patient perspective at different areas of that. So
that's awesome. And then you were saying, as you brought people on, you'd go out and do some marketing. What's the number one thing that you did, to market your business? Is it that patients just don't know that you exist and you can help them? Or is it like a certain strategy, tactic that you always rely on?
Yeah. So we do a ton of Facebook and Instagram ads. That I think they're a great value for return. We also started to do, we had always had a really robust blog. And so just throwing out good patient education for the masses, and then local targeted marketing based on that has really been helpful for us. What we don't do is, and this is one of my big things, we do not market to physicians. So I let people know that we're here. We send maybe some brochures, a couple cards, maybe a letter, a Christmas card here and there, just for touches of letting them know, hearing our name in the community. But I will not go and have a lunch with somebody and pay for their lunch. If I'm actually going to talk to a doctor at all, it's going to be, I need a place to refer my patients to, and I want to see if you're a good fit for our patients. What is your practice model? Can people email you? What are your rates? That kind of stuff. So it's more me interviewing them than it is me begging them for referrals, because that just doesn't work. So we're much more in that patient education, marketing mindset, where if we give people valuable information, then that will be a trusted place in the community, and then we can bust them into the clinic.
Awesome. Where'd that come from?
I don't know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you could, shoot, that fits in with exactly what I've been in my experience.
Always. Right?
That's really cool. Yeah, absolutely. So gosh, that's awesome. So is there anything particular that you talk about when educating your patients, like language you're using, when you're doing some of these ads or posts or blogs, what's the thing that you're saying what's the language, like maybe like just one example. So someone who's listening is like,
Yeah.
oh.
So we do a lot of like, we do a lot of education of like making people understand that certain pelvic conditions are common, but not normal. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we do a lot of education with like statistics. 46% of women, I don't quote me on the thing right now.
Yeah.
It's not in front of me, but this is true. 30% of people have pelvic organ prolapse after pregnancy. Your doctor might not think this is a big deal, but we can help. So those types of things where you're educating along with telling them where they can get help. So there's that. We've done a lot. We just revamped the website actually to make it a lot more actionable. So that was one thing where we took a look back. So we kind of took a look at all of the patient experience from the first time somebody's thinking that they have a pelvic problem all the way to like the decision-making process to go through to actually click and call our office. And we're trying to optimize each step of that system. And so we just optimized our website a little bit more for actionable items like click here now. But the language on our website now is much more telling a story of you have this internal problem, right? You have a pelvic organ prolapse problem. The other problem is that you can't play with your kids, and then what you shouldn't have to do this alone, and therefore we can help you. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's a much more creating like a little bit of a story. So someone's reading it being like, that's me. Oh my gosh, that's me. And then like, oh my gosh, these people are awesome. And then call,
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
we've gotten a huge uptick in the amount of people that are contacting us through our website based on that. It's actually really cool. We haven't done the metrics yet because Jesse hasn't nerded out on that quite yet. We've been doing it for about a little less than a month, but at the end of this month, we're going to like actually analyze, but we can already see that it's like way more people actually contacting and calling us when we change the wording on our website.
Wow. That's so cool. That's
super
so
interesting.
Great. Yeah. Was there one thing specific you knew that, all right, I need to like, was there one like place or word or thing that you changed drastically on your website? If we,
okay. So we talk about patient education marketing, right? We had a ton of information on our website about each of the conditions. But when we were actually going back and looking at it, we're like, gosh, this is super confusing for a patient. Like, are you an informational website? Are you an actual clinic? And so what we did, we actually took out a lot of the actual information on the clinic part of the website. And right now we're deciding what to do with that, right? We still have our SEO is like actually pretty good on some of our blog posts that we link in our website and stuff. So we don't want to get rid of those, but right now we're reworking like where we put those. We might actually convert them all to a separate informational website that links back and forth to our clinic website. But we just made it so much cleaner where there's still information, but people don't get lost in the information piece. They have a lot more streamlined action plan as to like, what do I need to do to fix this problem?
Yeah.
And so that was actually a really kind of epiphany that we had. And we're like, it's like, if you're not embarrassed by the first thing you do, you have a problem, or, and we're just like, how did we ever have our website like this in the first place? But yeah, we're just working on like optimizing each aspect of that too. I've de-emphasized myself quite a bit on the website. So it's more of like the pelvic sanity experience, a little bit about the founder. And then I'm actually going to have my own website that's like NicoleCozean.com that ends up telling a lot more about my story, because that was on the website. But then I was getting a ton of people that were calling only wanting to see me, and that was a problem. And still actually is kind of a problem, but we're working on that. So so there's a lot of things that I feel like finally like we have clarity on where we're getting more streamlined, and hopefully that'll even increase our actionable like people that call in and increase our numbers even a little bit more. Wow. Especially that we just hired our 4th person.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. And so you've obviously done a lot of writing and about stuff on your blog, and you've got a book. It's what the Interstitial Cystitis Solution. Is that right? Can you tell me a little
Yes.
about that?
Yeah. So Jesse helped me write that. If I were to, I suck at writing. I mean, again, like as a business owner, you just have to like know what you're good at. I know you talk a lot about this, like know what you're good at, know what you like to do, and then like just do those things. But I am not a good writer actually, but I have just so much information in my head. So we wrote a book together. Jesse helped me because he's like the concise person that helps to make it into like a readable thing where people aren't falling asleep. So we actually launched that came out in 2016. So that was like right at the time when we started this clinic, but that was in the works for like a year and a half before. So I started to write that book before I even knew I was going to open a practice.
Okay.
But it happened to work at the same time. And that was really cool. We actually get quite a few out of town patients from that. So I think we've seen people from 20 different US states. And I think we're up to 5 continents and a lot of different countries. So mostly from the book, but also just from an Instagram and stuff like that. We have a pretty robust Instagram clinic page, as well as I have my own Instagram profile too. But like, yeah, so the book ended up helping to drive a lot of, I think, that remote consultations and out of town program packages and stuff that we have. So
that's awesome. And do you get a lot of like inquiries so you get a lot of inquiries from people like, hey, I have this problem and no one here has helped me with it, and I want you to help me with it?
Yes. Yeah. And it's actually one of the interesting things, right? So I wrote the IC solution. Just to get a little clear, so interstitial cystitis is a bladder pain condition that ends up being a pelvic floor hypertone problem that makes you feel like you have to pee, you feel like you have a UTI. So it's like a pretty debilitating condition. I've always treated people pretty successfully with this. So when I was looking online, I was like, why? This seems like doom and gloom. So we wrote a positive, practical guide to basically do that. In my book, I talk about getting yourself to a pelvic PT. And that was my main goal. I thought that was going to be enough. And now we get so many people writing us saying, I've read your book. This is amazing, but I can't find a PT in my area, number one, or I've been going to them for X amount of time. I converse back with them a little bit about like, what are they doing? And it's like opposite of what should be happening. And so that's like my next like crusade, is to like just get a better somehow. That's why I started teaching continuing education courses, but even then it's like not enough. So I don't know what I'm going to do next exactly yet, but it's percolating in my brain to get some sort of mentorship program or something going on for people that are doing pelvic PT, so that we can help that whole system.
So it's like when you're treating patients and you get into the point where you're like, okay, I see, like if I slow down treating patients, I can spend more time helping more people.
Totally. I never ever thought that I would, because I think as PTs, we pride ourselves, and as business owners, we pride ourselves on being able to do the work, right? And I'm in the trenches with you guys, and I'm seeing just as many patients as you, if not more, and I feel like for the first time in my business life, I'm starting to finally see that if I can free up my personal time with not treating as many patients, then I can focus on, number one, training my gals at the clinic, even in a more systematic and robust way, but then also be able to do some of these other projects that I feel like might be able to impact even more patients around the world, the United States, more so than I could ever treat in my own clinic, So that's been a hard adjustment for me, to be perfectly honest. I really like patients. I like treating. I like doing that a lot. So I probably won't ever totally give that up. I mean, never say never, but right now that's like my struggle right now. So I went down from treating like 50 people to 40. Now I'm down like 30, and then taking that next jump down is hard for
Yeah.
me. So
Yeah. No, I get it. I had the same thing. And then all of a sudden I was like I'm like treating people. I could treat people in my sleep, and, I'm like not paying attention to what I'm doing, even though like I can do, and it's like a second brain to me. It's like, it's just
right,
automatic. I can treat people automatic. And I was just focused on how do I multiply myself and help more people. And I was like, I got to make this move, even though no one really wants me to,
yeah.
it's
So
free up
it'll
a
be
lot of
hard,
time
I
to do
think,
more.
with the patients that are like, so, like Nicole fans. But we'll work with it. It'll be okay, but ultimately it's going to be for the greater good of like everybody, both the people that I work for and other patients around that can, get pelvic PT in a good way. So
That's awesome. So tell me, like, what's going to happen for you and your business in the next 5 years?
5 years, gosh, I feel like 5-year goals, like we just the last 5-year goal I had, I was like, I feel like honestly, our business changes like every 6 months. So one of the big things that we sort of got a little almost caught in, we caught ourselves, is that as we're growing so fast, right, the next logical step, and we were growing out of our space, the next logical step was like, oh, open a second location. And we really pumped the brakes on that quite a bit. Even though we know that we could, we really wanted to make sure that if we're going to do that, we should. And so Jesse and I got together and we actually took a weekend away and really sort of worked backwards and was like, what do we really want? Like, where are we in our life right now? I know you have kids, Aaron, but like, we want them. And so we have to like start that process soon. And it's like, do we want to start that process at the same time we're spreading ourselves a little thin at the clinic and then when we did the analysis of, is this clinic running 100% on autopilot seamlessly with no problems without us being there? And the answer to that, frankly, was no. And so that's when we didn't really feel confident enough to really want to go open a second location right this minute. So I'll tell you our goals in the next 3 to 6 months is onboard Brittany, our 4th PT, create a true, we have systems in place of onboarding and stuff, but create a very, very repeatable system for that. And then optimize each one of those steps that we were talking about before. And then after 6 months, sort of see where we're at, and see what we're going to do with that. So, but there are so many other ways to grow our business without operating a second location. So we're looking into potentially doing some at-home stuff for postpartum moms. We can make some of the semi-private classes a little bit more robust to get people that are being discharged from physical therapy or ending their physical therapy thing to stay in our clinic sort of funnel. So we're really trying to optimize that first before we do anything.
Wow,
but I mean, in 5
awesome.
years, I would love to be still at this location, maybe at that time a second one. But then also really having a good presence in some sort of mentorship program. I don't really know what that looks like yet, but that's sort of been percolating in my mind now that I'm actually doing it with my own people. So we'll see how that ends up turning out.
That's awesome. So is there anything that you get fired up about that I haven't asked you about yet? Like, because you told me before the show, was like, I get fired up about stuff. I was like,
I get fired up
about that we haven't really touched on that you.
Yeah. So I get fired up about a lot of stuff. We already talked a little bit about, like, I don't feel like pelvic PT is very like standardized around the whole system. But what I really get fired up about is our profession's hierarchical mindset about physicians, like us needing for physicians' permission to do stuff. And I don't give two craps whether we have direct access or not. We still have a very, we still have such an expertise that doctors don't have, that I feel like we need to rise to their level and believe that we can offer an expertise level that is similar, if not more than theirs. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, it's just
Preach.
like, I don't get, you know what? I just feel too that like one of the things that I've noticed a lot about having people come like right out of school is that they're learning that in PT school. And that's what's really frustrating also, is that it's like, nobody talks about, I talk about pelvic physical therapy in the orthopedic classes at a bunch of PT schools around where I'm from. And I've just blown their mind with the amount of pelvic floor issues that can be in the orthopedic population, right? They're all in it, everything. And the first friggin' question that comes up, one of the first two questions that always comes up is, what do you do about insurance? Do you take insurance at your clinic? And it's like, where's that even coming from? That has to be coming from like the PT schools that are, it's almost like teaching to the test, right? You're teaching to the system that you don't want to be a part of anyways. And it's like, what are we doing? Right. So that's where we have to like unteach a lot of that when we get here. And then the other thing is like, everyone's worried about liability and getting sued. And I'm just like, what? So my sister's an attorney. Yeah. And it's just like, there's so many steps before like a patient can like sue you for something. It's like, why is everybody so like worried about this? I don't know. It's a
lot of fear. It's fear-based.
So fear-based stuff. Yeah. And it's like, what the hell? So, yeah, I just feel like
that change. Like, how do we change? How do we change?
I don't know. You know? I don't know. Well, I mean, I'm trying to put my money where my mouth is a lot of times, right? Where I'm like teaching at PT schools and, yeah, but I do feel like there needs to be more options for students to go into where they feel like they might want to, like they don't know what they don't know. So I feel like, yes, it's important to get all of the like didactic stuff and all of the, and I get it that we can't teach everything in PT school, but what I do think we should do is teach a lot more about the different avenues of practice and even like a non-clinical side. There's a lot of things that PTs can do. Like we pay our PT to do our Instagram page. Like that's valuable, you know, like there's a lot of other things that we can do as PTs that require our PT brain, but don't actually require manual on service, you know? So there's a lot I think we can do. And
yeah.
So
I'm trying to figure out how do we get the mindset shift at the top so it trickles down rather than just pushing from the side or the bottom. You know,
you know what that means though is that we've got to be at the top, like doing that stuff. So, and then like, when are we gonna have the time? We're running businesses and stuff like that. So it's like it's a catch-22 a little bit, but I feel like the more things that we do like this though are good, and you know, hopefully. We just need to figure it out though, because it's like it's you're right, but because it's not going to be as effective change as if we keep doing it from the bottom.
I see it. It's a mindset, and it's like, oh, you're a student. Okay, who do I trust right now? It's my clinical instructors and my professors, and I come out and like, okay, I need referrals from physicians. I need permission to do this. I'm not 100% sure this is right because I don't have a MRI or X-ray to tell me otherwise. But I've got a clinical test that I think I know how to use, but when I do it, it doesn't really make sense because on the other end of this, it's not always valid. You know, it's like, it's your physician to test your labrum. So how would I know what's wrong? Right.
How would you know? So we run into that quite a bit too with, so we're getting people that are coming to us with a pelvic floor issue. They go, that probably has been missed. I mean, like endometriosis, like is the average time to diagnosis is like 7 to 10 years. IC gets misdiagnosed like up to 6 years. So people, it's like So one of the biggest things that I tease my girls about is that the instinct is, it's like, if something weird is going on, it's like, oh, well, you should refer back to your doctor. And it's like, well, okay, is there any red flag? And to go through the checklist to make sure that you're actually not missing something.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? Like, that's the same damn physician that missed this for 7 years. Like, why are we like so quick to offload responsibility
Right.
back to the physician when it's a musculoskeletal neuromuscular issue? Like, yes, we need to go through our checklist to make sure that it isn't something, and that we're doing our due diligence to make sure that we don't, miss something big. But like, why is the first like instinct to be like, oh, we need a doctor to tell us what's wrong? It's like, we're the musculoskeletal and neuromuscular experts. Like, you tell the patient what you think the problem is.
Yeah.
So that's what I feel like.
Absolutely. Awesome.
But that's what we're trying to teach here, at our clinic. And we're trying to teach our patients the same thing, like that it's okay to be respectfully questioning to your physician, because they don't know everything, and neither do we, but like, we each can bring in our own expertise. And then with that multidisciplinary type of care, then we can sort of piece together your whole puzzle. But we should be the quarterbacks of that. Because we're the people that are seeing the patients the most often. So
yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, I wish I had.
I'm on soapbox now.
I know. I wish I had the ability to have a conversation here with more physicians locally about what's happening with their patients, but it's like, it doesn't happen, and it's unfortunate.
Totally. We started having our patients write letters to their patients after, and then we sort of we try not to be too snarky, but we do some passive aggressive stuff sometimes if like a patient has come from, if they're seeing a doctor and they should have been referred to us a long time before, I send a little letter that says like, oh, this patient we have a mutual patient that's now currently under my care. This is what I found. This is the musculoskeletal problem. And please like refer other people like this person in the future. Like, so we try to do education that way. Who knows if they read it, but it makes me feel better.
Awesome. That's
about
so
myself.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, is there anything that you think that someone who is getting into pelvic PT or getting into a cash-based pelvic health practice, like, what should they know or look out for or do, to ensure their success?
Gosh, I feel like, okay, so first of all, just from a pelvic PT standpoint, I definitely think that you can start a cash practice with less than 5 years of experience. That's totally cool. You just need a mentor. So both from a clinical aspect and from a business aspect. So however that's pieced together, I feel like you just have to reach out to people that have done it before, because at the end of the day, we also have to be able to put our money where our mouth is and get people better and help guide their care. So we have to be good clinicians, and we also have to be have our business mentors like you guys, like you do, Aaron, and stuff like that. So I feel like that's the biggest thing, is to know who you need to reach out to. Because you can't do it by yourself. I didn't do it by myself. I'm sure, Aaron, you didn't do it by yourself. And so we just need to like make sure that we to do that, and really I think my husband and I have done a really good job of being pretty deliberate with our decision makings and working backwards from, what do you want for your own life? And are you happy right now? And then work backwards from that. That's really how I came to even start this practice in the first place. I don't think I would have ever been like, oh, I want to start my own practice. But when you work backwards and you're like, what kind of care do you want to provide? What do you want your personal life to be like, either from a money standpoint or just from a happiness standpoint? I don't want to treat more than 8 people a day, whatever. Then I feel like if you work backwards from there, sometimes you'll find that underneath some of your maybe fear or apprehension is the actual drive to start your own thing. And the more people that are doing it, the more it's going to be in the public's mind, and it's just going to become more of a sort of household thing to do, is to go to a cash physical therapy based practice,
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
that's what I really think.
That's amazing. That's some great, powerful tips and insight. So, Nicole, if someone wants to reach out to you, either find your book, learn more about what you're doing in your clinic or with interstitial cystitis and all that stuff, where do we
Yeah.
find you?
So our clinic website is pelvicsanity.com. We have Instagram at Pelvic Sanity, and then I have my own at Nicole Cozean DPT. You feel free to reach out via email. I get back to everybody that I can. It's Nicole, Nicole, at pelvicsanity.com. Those are probably the best ways. You can DM me on Instagram. You can private message me on Facebook. We have all of those avenues. But
Awesome.
yeah, so I love to hear feedback. I love to answer questions. So anybody can reach out.
Cool. Awesome. That's so great. Well, and we'll also post links in our show notes when the podcast comes out. Nicole, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been great. Thanks for spending time with us today.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Aaron. I really appreciate it. This is like really cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you're totally crushing it out there in California. So keep on rocking.
Thanks.
And this is the CashPT Lunch Hour with Aaron LeBauer and Nicole Cozean. And I want you to dream big and don't stop until you get to your dreams, or you blow them out of the water, All right. Y'all keep working hard, and we'll see you on the next show.